your first observation with like, I mean, it's been a few days in now after the race. What's the kind of like the first observation about like the mindset you're having right now?
My first observation, about how I'm feeling after the race, probably just disappointment. Still trying to process that, and I think as time goes on, I will be proud of my race because I did have to come back from such a difficult injury.
Yeah.
But I also believed in the final sort of 8 weeks that I had a chance to medal, and I just didn't quite show that, particularly on the run. It's kind of felt like the first time in a long time my run sort of let me down a bit. So that's disappointing, and I think when you really believe you can do something and then you fall a little short, it's just normal to have to process that and get over those emotions or deal with those emotions.
After Boulder, how was the time till getting here?
My final, it was about 8 or 9 weeks since we filmed in Boulder, and my final block up to Paris, and that actually went really well, like much better than we kind of anticipated, because I've been, kind of coming back from this knee injury for a while now, and I managed to string together some of my best training weeks that I have in a long time. So that was great, and overall it was a pretty positive time. I wasn't feeling too much nerves or anxiety, and just kind of enjoying training for my final Olympics.
You talked about like that sort of period after Tokyo, and like how you sort of, that wind down sort of moment, and that I think you were talking about, I'm just thinking from one Olympics to like year by year to the next Olympics, and it's just like go almost. How will that be different now? Like, how do you think that time after the Olympics will?
Yeah, well, this time around, it's quite different since Tokyo, because this is my final Olympics, whereas Tokyo I sort of had in the back of the mind that I would prepare for Paris. But this is, my fifth and final time, so I know there's not going to be another 4-year block of work, which is like, I think I'm still trying to process that. It's definitely a lot to take in, and also I didn't win. So once you win, it's just like a whirlwind of things you do after the race, and for me, I was fifth, and also processing that is sort of pleased with it, but also disappointed. So at the moment, I don't feel kind of as drained and exhausted and just emotional, which I'm hoping prepares me to race a bit more this year. Whereas after Tokyo, I was like, I did race, but I didn't want to race at all. You don't have to win. You don't have to win a medal to be proud of your accomplishment and to be proud of your journey to get here. And I think ultimately I'm going to be very proud of my whole journey and race and everything as time goes on. But at the moment, when you're so still in it and you're still at the games and you see people winning medals and you haven't had time to sort of just step away and process it all, it's really kind of a difficult space to navigate. But yeah, I mean, I think being an Olympian, everyone should be very proud of, regardless of how the race went, because it's not easy to get here. It's not easy to get here and you could qualify, and then, anything can happen until race day. And so actually lining up on race day and completing the race or starting the race, everyone should be very, very proud of that.
What was your feeling when you stood at the starting line of the swim? Is there anything that you remember?
The starting line of the swim, what did I feel? I think in those moments, that's when I try to be my most confident, and you're not content, but you're trying not to think too much of the nerves and just think of confidence and getting to that first buoy as fast as you can. So that's kind of what I was thinking of, being you've got this and you got to be aggressive and get out of it, get out.
Like that you approach it very tactically of the flow of the river. And I mean, obviously the swim was so great. We're watching, we're like, oh wow, this is going really well. So how did that unfold? Did it really was the game plan really on it in a way, for the swim?
Right, yeah, it was. The swim here was very tactical because we were swimming in the Seine with the current, and being able to read the current was one thing, but being able to actually have the confidence to swim the current as it should have been swum was another thing, because you're not ever swimming the straightest line when you're coming back into the current. And I think that scares a lot of people off, to know that you are not swimming the straightest line, but it's actually the fastest line.
Yeah.
And so I was very confident in what lines I needed to swim, and was lucky that I got to the first and second buoy, like right at the front, and then from there just took charge and I guess was bold and confident enough to swim right to the outside, which if you didn't know it was a current, you'd probably be looking like, why is this girl swimming so weird, zigzagging there on the sides? But yeah, that was actually dodging the current, and it was the fastest line to swim. And yeah, as we saw, I managed to open up quite a gap on the rest of the field. And yeah, people that got that wrong and swam more in the middle, you could just lose chunks of time.
Yeah.
And you know, you could be out of the race basically from the start.
Was it just like analyzing it, or how did you like physically get into that space?
Right, I didn't do anything different physically, just did my normal swim training, but we analyzed the swim a lot. We could look back at the race from last year at the test event and really see what lines were good to swim and what lines were not good to swim. My husband comes from a paddling background. He grew up paddling rivers in South Africa, so he's very good at reading a river and gave me strict instructions on what to do, and I just followed them.
What was the number one instruction of what not to do?
Do not swim in the middle. If you swim in the middle on the way back into that current, like, your day's done.
Going on the bike,
Mm-hmm.
the rain before,
Mm-hmm.
the wet streets. I mean, it was so tricky. What were your thoughts then? How did you navigate?
Yeah, the roads were so slick. When I woke up in the morning and I saw it was raining, I was like, oh, here we go. But it reminded me of Tokyo, because we raced in the rain there, and I'm I would say one of the stronger technical riders, so I wasn't nervous or scared for the rain, but I knew these roads could be especially slick. So you just have to make a few changes with your tire pressure. So that's what we did. But yeah, the first lap of the bike, I was definitely very cautious to see how slick the roads were,
Yeah.
how much you could push the corners or not. But yeah, it was definitely a surprise to see it
was
pouring with rain.
Does it change when you wake up in the morning and you see that this is happening, does it change your game plan at all? You're just like, let's go all in, I know I got this. How does that sort of...
Yeah, it changed my game plan a little, knowing that it could be easier to split the race up, because people would be very tentative on the bike and be very nervous to ride aggressively through the corners. That was one. And then secondly, some people just don't like racing in the rain, and immediately they could be just mentally out of it, like checked out before they've even started.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was important to be like, no, like, you like the rain, like, game on, this is good for you, and be positive about it. Whereas, yeah, if you were negative about it, that was it.
Yeah.
You know,
But then it's a mindset question in the end, right? Also just like, okay, I got this. You felt confident.
Mm-hmm.
And how was it? I mean, when the bike was strong, and then how did you feel before transitioning into your run? Did you feel good? Did you feel strong enough, or?
Yeah, coming off towards the end of the bike, like, I felt pretty good. The bike hadn't been too hard. I'd been reasonably tactical. But no, I felt it was a small group. The contenders were there, so I knew the run was going to be tough. But yeah, I felt pretty good, pretty confident, and then I started running and didn't feel so good, and I was like, uh-oh, this is unusual for me. Oh, the one thing that did happen on the bike is very early on I lost a bottle.
No.
And so I think that I still had gels in another bottle, but definitely impacted me, I would say.
When during the race did you feel, oh, I'm missing this? Was this like right when you lost it, that you were anticipating that you're missing the fuel? Or was there a point when you're like, oh, now I really, just my body's responding to like a lack of fuel?
It felt like on the run, my body was responding a little bit to a lack of fuel, because it just felt like I couldn't push and get into my running. And typically that means I have messed up my fueling somewhere. So I mean, competing at this level, if you're a little bit off, it can be a big difference. So, I mean, who knows? There's also so many other factors that could have come into play, but when I'm racing, and it's like crucial for me to take in all of my fuel on the bike, and to lose a bottle within the first 100 or 200 meters of the bike certainly was not ideal.
Ross sent me a quote from Boulder that you said. You were saying, I've kind of just gone from one year to the next, from Olympics to the next Olympics. How will you give yourself space now? Like, how will that look like, just going back? And it's not, I mean, you mentioned already that it will be different because your last Olympics, but how will that sort of space look like now in the training and racing? Do you think you will change anything actively?
Right, yeah, I think now that I'm finished with all these Olympic cycles, I think the biggest difference is my sort of year to year won't be influenced by having an Olympic Games every 4 years, because pretty much everything you do in this whole quad in a build up to an Olympics, what you're doing in year one is certainly part of the process of what you want to be doing in your final year build into the Olympics, if that makes sense. Whereas I think now I just have a lot more freedom of where I want to race, what distances I want to race, when I want to race. So I think that's kind of exciting for me, that there's so many different formats of triathlon that I can now start to experiment with. I mean, yeah, I've done a lot of off-road racing, but yeah, getting into the sort of the non-draft scene, and that's a whole different side of triathlon, different people, different women to race, and so I think that's going to be kind of nice and refreshing for me. I will never forget leading onto the Champs-Élysées, lap one of the bike, and just that roar of the crowd. And it's just such an iconic street to ride. Like, that was really special, that I had a gap and I kind of had that moment to myself. So that is definitely one big memory that I'll take. And then secondly, just all of the people that came to watch me race and support, and they had Flora shirts on and made banners, and yeah, just a lot of them, that was their first time getting to see me race, and they got to see me race at an Olympics with one of the most crazy crowds ever. So that's also a very special memory. You have good races, you have disappointing races, and that's kind of part of the journey, and you kind of learn to go with the flow of the ups and the downs. I think, you know, for me, I won in Tokyo, and I just have to keep remembering, well, yeah, that was my ultimate goal and I achieved it, and anything I did here was a bonus. So that's ultimately what I keep kind of trying to come back to, but I'm human and I'm a competitive athlete, and of course I wanted to be on that podium, but I don't know, there's also more chances, there's more races, life goes on, and it's just, you know, one race. It's not going to define my career, and very proud of everything I've accomplished thus far.